The last thing I think Putin might really want is all those soldiers who are fighting in Russia and Ukraine now to actually come home. That would cause a problem for him inside Russia. So I'm not sure that he does want to end it.
Donald Trump has said he's sending his special envoy to meet Vladimir Putin in an effort to finalise their peace plan for Ukraine. Posting on Truth Social in the last hour, this is fresh in, the US president said Steve Witkoff will head to Moscow and that he hopes a meeting will take place between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky soon. Here's Trump speaking at the White House earlier, saying he thinks a deal is close.
We're working on that final war. It's not easy, but I don't know. I think we're going to get there. 25,000 soldiers, Ukraine, Russia. In the last month, 25,000 soldiers have died. So I think we're getting very close to a deal. We'll find out. I thought that one would have been gone quicker.
Well, we're joined by Kurt Volker now, who was President Trump's former special representative for Ukraine negotiations during his first term. Kurt, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. Tell me what you make, first of all, of the way that this peace process has unfolded over the last week. The US-Russia negotiated plan, the Europeans having their say, and then the US and Ukraine working together for this latest 19-point plan, which Donald Trump has assured us is very close.
Well, hi, Kate, and thanks for having me on. It's great to speak with you. This has been a real shambles the past couple of weeks. As you said, we had essentially a Russian plan that was presented by the United States, wholly unacceptable to Ukraine, to Europe, and something that Putin himself didn't even endorse. And so that had to be corralled and corrected. And that's what Marco Rubio spent the past several days doing. He flew to Geneva, he met with Ukrainians, he met with European allies, and they began amending this disastrous plan that had been presented, trying to turn it into something that is actually reasonable. Now, what I think will happen here is that we will have a reasonable plan that the U.S. and Ukraine and European allies are comfortable with, and Vladimir Putin will reject that, which is essentially where we have been in this war for the past several years. We have a reasonable position by Ukraine and a Russian insistence on continuing the war unless all of their maximalist demands are met. And the trick for the West still remains to put enough pressure on Putin to cause him to want to end the war. He's, as Keir Starmer just said, he's the only one that started it. He's the only one that continues it. He's the only one that can end it in the sense that he can tell his forces to stop fighting, and then the war's over.
Yeah, I mean, look, the issue here is what does the agreed peace deal look like? Reuters have had sight of President Zelensky's speech to the Coalition of the Willing, which met today. He's urged European leaders to hash out a framework for deploying a reassurance force to Ukraine and to continue supporting Kyiv for as long as Moscow shows no willingness to end its war. Now, that reassurance force, presumably, Zelensky would want as part of a peace deal. But when you look at that point specifically, and others, of course, we can talk about territory, it just seems so unlikely that Vladimir Putin is going to agree to that.
Right.
Has this been done the wrong way round? And actually, what is the best way to get Vladimir Putin to agree to anything?
Well, let's start with that. The best way to get Putin is to put so much pressure on his state finances that he can't continue the war the way he is. His state finances are driven by oil and gas revenue. As Donald Trump likes to point out, Europe is still paying Russia for oil and gas. That's something that is fueling the war. The global oil prices are down, but they can go down further. We have sanctions now on Russian oil as well as Russian gas for a long time, but not secondary sanctions to go after those who are doing intermediary trading like China or India. So there's a lot that we have not done to put pressure on the Kremlin's finances. The second thing is to make sure that the playing field is more level when it comes to Ukraine being able to defend itself and to strike at the military targets inside Russia that are being used by Russia to target Ukraine. So you got to be able to fight back. And that's longer range systems and precision systems, which Ukraine still needs more of. Those are the things that I think would help bring Putin to the table.
I suppose the other obvious question is actually really whether Putin has any appetite to end this anyway.
No, he doesn't. Clearly, he benefits from the situation of war. It allows him to flame nationalist fires inside Russia. He creates instability in the neighborhood. That creates opportunities for exercising influence. It cements his hold in power in Russia. The last thing I think Putin might really want is all those soldiers who are fighting in Russia and Ukraine now to actually come home. That would cause a problem for him inside Russia. So I'm not sure that he does want to end it. And that's why we have to change his calculus. We have to make sure there's enough pressure put on to make it more in his interest to stop the fighting. And I suspect what we'll end up with is a ceasefire in place, not a Ukrainian withdrawal from Ukrainian territory, but just a ceasefire in place that then we try to make as permanent as possible through deterrence. And that would include the deployment of a so-called reassurance force. I prefer a deterrent force, but European NATO forces in Ukraine helping to train, equip, assist with air defense, and deter Russia from future attacks. I think that should be the mission, and I think that is a necessary part of preventing the resumption of the war after a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, look, in terms of approach, Donald Trump may have this right. He's directing US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to meet with Putin in Moscow, and then Army Secretary Dan Driscoll will meet with the Ukrainians. I mean, that is as close as we're going to get to Ukraine and Russia meeting. Will they ever meet? Should they ever meet? Or does the US act as the independent broker in this?
Well, no, they should meet, and we should encourage their meeting. But Putin does not recognize Ukraine as a legitimate state, and he doesn't recognize Zelensky as the legitimate leader of Ukraine. So he doesn't want to meet Zelensky because that conflicts with his ideology and his approach to this war. So Putin doesn't really want to meet with Zelensky, and I don't think he will. And Putin also wants to get all of his maximalist demands committed to in advance before he would agree to even sign the document or to sit down with Zelensky and Trump together. He won't do it unless he gets everything he wants, and that's simply not going to happen.
What is reasonable to happen about territory? And I know, reasonable might mean that sort of Russia can't have any of it. But if we put our best foot forward in trying to find an end to this, what is reasonable in terms of territory?
Right. Yeah, well, just one thing I want to highlight, in this original U.S. proposal that was put out before it was being amended by the Ukrainians and Europeans, it called on Ukraine to withdraw from Ukrainian territory and did not call on Russia to withdraw from Ukrainian territory. That's just upside down, and that's why that could never be agreed. But what would be reasonable at this stage is to have a ceasefire in place, a understanding that Russia is going to occupy about 20% of Ukraine. No one legitimizes that by recognizing it as Russian territory. It is Ukrainian territory occupied by Russia. And then we have a longer term process about raising claims against Russia to recover the territory, which may go nowhere, but maybe, 10, 20, 30 years from now, something would change. Remember, the Baltic states were occupied for 40 years and they got their independence back, or Germany was divided for 40 years and then it became unified again. So I think that would be the reasonable way to go. Ceasefire in place, non-recognition, played out over time without military means to reconquer.
Yeah, Keir Starmer today saying the issue of territorial concessions not covered by the framework agreement. And you're right that would come at a later stage. AFP, the press agency was told by a Ukrainian official, the new version, I'm just trying to glean as much as I can from this new version, said it was significantly better, said the Ukrainian official. It proposed a cap on the country's future military forces from 600,000 to 800,000 members. So that's close to the number of Ukrainian personnel in active service. So it does appear tweaks have been made. We haven't seen the document, so it's very hard to tell. Yeah. Who has let down the Ukrainians more, the United States or the Europeans?
I think we both share the blame. I think you have to go back to the very beginning of the war, of the full-scale invasion, where we were offering Zelensky a ride out. And he said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. We were telling him that he wouldn't last for 3 days. We were saying that they were going to fall. We were slow to provide the defensive equipment that they needed. We said no to all kinds of defensive equipment and military equipment before we finally said yes and then provided it. So we were slow, we were late, we were insufficient. And I think we're all sharing in that responsibility. I think now in the Trump administration, I have to say, he did inherit a war that had gone on for 3 years and had become a bit of a stalemate. And to end that stalemate, Trump is trying, pushing here, pushing there, throwing out ideas, throwing out concessions to Putin to see if he can get Putin to bite. So far, Putin has done nothing. He has not given an inch on any of his positions. And I think that we are going to have to insist that he will have to give an inch if there's going to be an end to the war, or we will be placing more pressure on him. And again, we've let the Ukrainians down by not getting to that point faster.
Well, look, thank you for speaking to us. It's always great to have you on. Kurt Volker, President Trump's former special representative for Ukraine negotiations during his first term. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.